Hello, my marketing and entrepreneur friends. Welcome back to another exciting episode of the Let's Talk Marketing podcast, where I, your host, Katya Ellison, get to explore the latest trends, techniques, and strategies in the world of marketing. I am very excited to introduce my guest today, Nikki Lindgren, on the LTM pod. Nikki is the founder of Pennock, an agency that is reshaping the way of beauty and lifestyle brands approaching marketing. With over 20 years of experience, she's worked with more than, get ready for this, 228 brands. And she helps to scale DTC businesses while driving impressive growth. Now, in this episode, Nikki shares her expertise in customer acquisition, paid media, and how she's using this human-centric approach to help brands grow. Together, we chat about journey, about how digital marketing is evolving, especially in the beauty and the fashion space. And something else that may pique your interest is how she's been able to leverage platforms like TikTok to boost her clients' success. And if that wasn't enough, we dig into a little bit of dork talk, is what I'm going to call it, as we scratch the surface on automation and marketing tools really needed to create high-performing strategies that truly deliver impressive returns. From customer surveys and paid media, there's a little something for everyone. So be sure to stick around. Oh, and also don't forget, grab your favorite beverage, sit back, and let's dive into it. Let's talk marketing. Welcome to the Let's Talk Marketing podcast. Really excited to have you on here today. We're going to unpack a little bit of marketing strategies, specifically with D2C brands, kind of from the fashion lens as well, too. So I'm really excited to have you on here. Thank you so much.
Katya, thank you for having me today.
Now, as always, I like to start off by really having the audience get to know the guest. So I've got my starter questions. Are you ready for them?
I think so.
Okay, fantastic. They're very easy. Now, what was your first marketing role? It could have marketing in the title or it could not. This question I love because the answers, it's a full spectrum. So what would you consider your first marketing role?
Yeah, my first marketing role, I don't even think had marketing in the title, but I think it's important to mention. I went to college at San Francisco State University, and I was sort of working quite full time through it all. So it was very busy. And I was able to land a job in inside sales with a small game publishing company. This is like tabletop games, not like digital games. And while I was doing both like inside sales and like receivables in terms of like financing and purchasing, when I had spare time, I was doing marketing. And this was just a huge opportunity for me to like learn how to work in a small startup. It was the co-founders and me, and we were the only 3 employees. And so really kind of anything I had an idea on, they just said, if you have bandwidth to do it, go run. And so that's where I kind of got to start testing out a little bit of I guess there was a little bit of social back then, but email marketing. So that was my first role as a true professional coming to light.
I love that. I also love the fact that you said that you started with inside sales, because I think a lot of marketing is sales. Sales and marketing well, I was going to say kissing cousins, which that'll lead us down a completely different path. But do you know what I mean? They're so closely related. I think the ultimate goal is to obviously get the sale. The approach is slightly different. So I can see how those two are kind of intertwined.
Yeah.
Well, now that's where you started. Where are you at now? What is your current role?
Yeah, so I'm now leading day-to-day managing operations for my agency called Pennock. We've been around for 5 years, and we're really focused on helping direct-to-consumer brands and now some social commerce too, because it's not just your domain these days. So we help brands that are emerging within fashion and like beauty lifestyle space. So emerging to us are brands that are a couple million in per year to like 20 million in a year is usually the sweet spot of finding the brands. And then we figure out a growth plan, manage their growth mainly through paid media and SEO thereafter. So between my inside sales job and my current role, there were a lot of gaps filled in terms of marketing knowledge to get us to where we are today.
Oh, absolutely. Now, what do you love about what you currently do?
Well, it's interesting you bring up the inside sales thing because I am our business development person, which I'm like,
Yeah.
how did I not see this coming? Like, as the agency owner, how did I not recognize I would be doing sales all the time? So that's one part of the job that I kind of have to eat the frog and like deal with it in my daily schedule because it's still not my favorite part to go out and like try to convince brands to take calls with us,
Yeah.
etc. So that's one part of the job that goes all the way back to that first role that is in the mix. But I think my most exciting part of the job is really talking to these brands as we're onboarding them to
Yeah.
figure out the strategy and the media mix. And so getting to know the ins and outs of these brands and how we can build out a plan and a forecast that maybe even exceeds their like wildest dreams is the coolest thing to get to do ever. And to get to do it for so many different brands at once and have like that much more information on the best ways to do it is pretty amazing.
I think that it's got to be one of the coolest things. I think you're also probably in this season with, Cyber Monday and Black Friday, right? Where this is D2C brands foaming at the mouth. There's so much going on right now. Now this will post afterwards, but this is definitely the time of the year that I think that lots of things are hopping. Now you had mentioned the sales portion. Is that what, if anything, I could pluck out of your day to day to make it like the perfect job, or would you pluck something else out?
I think I would pluck out the sales piece, but I think it's really hard for us. I mean, we've got a full time staff of 9 people, and
Yeah.
that's it. We don't have any freelancers or consultants. So, like, I don't have another person on payroll to do that for us right now. And I don't know if can hire an outside team yet because I'm really protective. It's my baby, and I want to make sure that every conversation we have is a good one. So it's hard for me to entrust with another person to do it. But yes, in a perfect world, like all of the lead gen, like I would just offload to someone else.
Yes, and this is this perfect world scenario where I have a magic wand, which I don't currently have, but I keep looking for it just in case I can make people's dreams come true. Now, I would imagine that, kind of running a digital agency, especially in the area that you're in, you're going to have to stay really up to date with like the trends of what's going on with digital marketing, social. I mean, you mentioned social commerce. So, how do you keep up to date with trends? Is there a newsletter, a podcast, a key opinion leader that you're watching? Where are you keeping up?
Yeah, so many. So my personal favorites are DTC, which is by Pilot House, a bigger agency in the space, and then Common Thread Collective are really good at what they do too. So reading up on their index and their best practices help me individually. Now we've been around long enough that I was able to promote someone into a role where her role is really to lead operations and to be at the forefront of knowing whatever is going on so that she
Yeah.
can build out our testing program. So most of that information is just getting, fed to me through employees at the company now. And there are some like surprises. Recently, Meta launched site links on their ads, and I'm like, what does that even mean? But as we started deploying them in the early weeks, like ROAS was so much better than without them. So we're like, cool, now that we've guinea pigged this with a couple brands, like let's roll it out to the rest. So those are examples where it's like, I don't even know what they look like in the wild, let alone was not responsible for finding any information about that. But having the team be able to come to me and say, here's what we're testing and here's why is pretty fantastic.
I love the fact that your team is testing things because, and it makes sense to test and see a positive return on ad spend, because I think that's what all of the platforms want you to do, right? I think those are the changes to the algorithms that you really feed into. And when you're following the trends, you can follow the trends and get the lift during those times where they really want to double down on people. Like they want to like invest in the people that are trying it out. So I think that's fantastic. And, a good note for all of the listeners. This is a good reason to stay up to date on these trends because it does help your return on investment of your time and your ads.
Mm-hmm.
So let's dive into the strategy portion. We're going to talk about just marketing strategies as it pertains to D2C. When it comes to paid marketing, how do you kind of determine the right channels for specifically a fashion brand?
Yeah. So it's going to come down to, the brand having a good sense of where their customers are coming from, right? So some pretty obvious stuff here, right? But I think one of the things we'll notice is like brands will start working together and they've never surveyed their customers. And like, how much work is it for you to stack up a survey? Here are some like 10 boilerplate questions that would help us, build a better strategy. Oftentimes brands are coming to us from previous agencies, so we have history. It's not like we're setting up their pixel and like running their first ad for them ever. But what we want to gain insight into is, are the right age demos getting reached by the platforms we're on? We've got a brand we work with that is really 20 to like 35-year-old is their demo, probably like higher household income. And they have more of a play in the South than they do in other parts of the country. Okay, well, we look at their metadata and their historical ads have been serving majority to 65 plus, which is not who they're trying to grow their customer base with, and it's not performing at the rates they want. So obviously easy things like exclude mature audiences, right? You can do that on any platform, but like if they've got really great content already organically on TikTok and they're building more influencers into their plan, we should start testing out TikTok, right? So those are the decisions we'll make with brands based on who their customer is and where we believe they hang out. And oftentimes that data can be found through surveying the customers. So there are some rules, like if your budget is only of a certain size, you have to kind of keep your placements a little bit more narrow and niche. But as budgets open up, we want to be really mindful that every new expansion of channel and or campaign is going to help prove something out and isn't just like, well, we wanted to see how low CPM could be, so we launched this new thing.
Yeah, I like this strategy behind that. Essentially fish where the fish are. That's your audience is those are the fish. You don't want to be in a completely different pond than where you intend to be. I'd like to unpack a little bit the surveying your customers, because I do think it's really key, and I don't think that people often do that. I think it falls into this voice of customer bucket, but I also feel like that's an arbitrary term that people just say because it sounds like I know what I'm talking about. But tell me a little bit more about a customer survey. What does that look like? Is it really long? Do I do it once a year? Is it every quarter? Give me some tips for, really figuring out my customers.
Yeah, so I think like a straight up, depending on the size of your audience, like a Google form or a type form could be sufficient. I think one of the questions you want to ask is your net promoter score, like how often or how likely are they 1 through 10 to recommend you? Yeah. That's just a good basic. If it's not part of your drip series already for order fulfillment, it should be. But beyond that, it would be what data we're trying to collect, like what social channel they're spending the most time on, maybe what other brands they shop from, what they're doing in their spare time. So I'm giving you like the worst examples here ever, but I think it's just like what do we need to know to facilitate our needs to grow the marketing channel? And oh, by the way, if most of your customers have like a really good experience with you, like sending them this random questionnaire later on for like maybe a 10% discount or something, a good reminder for them to just purchase from you again, right? So I think that that's just sort of the other low-hanging fruit part of it is oftentimes you can pair this with, once you fill it out, there's an offer for you and reignite and increase your LTV with these older customers who maybe haven't bought for a while.
Yeah, I love that. I'm such a big fan of surveys. I like to fill them out and I also like to create them. But in general, I think like you can capture so much information. And I think what I heard you say was really something that's a little bit more of a consistent survey versus like creating something monumental. And there's a time for both of them, right? Like an annual customer survey. How can we improve? What do you think? But I really want the listeners to also take away, not only are you like learning about your customers, but you're also seeing who your advocates are too, which I think is a huge win. And I would imagine a huge win for D2C and fashion brands for that user generated content. But I'd love to hear your thoughts on that.
Yeah, I know. I agree completely. I think if it were a short enough survey that's just going to take a user a couple minutes to fill in, like for sure have it a standing thing that rolls out to everyone who places an order. That way you can have someone on your team like look at that data on a regular basis. But I think, when you're doing the once a year thing, like make sure you're not asking them questions that you can find in your own data. Like, when did you last
Yeah.
purchase? What's your favorite SKU of ours? All of those things. It's like, well, our data provides that information. Like, we have that in-house rather. So like, don't ask them questions like that.
That's such a great tip. Now, when it comes to paid media, there's this idea of the 360 effect. What is that?
Yeah, so I think it's interesting because it gets thrown around a lot. I was just on a phone call
Oh,
with
yeah.
a fractional CMO today, and we were talking about that in general. So I think there's like 360 marketing, meaning like, hey, we shouldn't have silos. Everything should stack up together. Like, what's going on in email should be also mirrored into paid media. The landing page experience of where everyone comes needs to look the same. But when we talk about paid only in 360 there, to me, it's maybe more fair to go through the stages of awareness and just say, like, does our marketing plan allow us to pull a cold audience in who is not problem aware and make them product aware at the end of, I think there's 5 stages, I don't even know. And so that's really what we kind of want to do for our brands, is pull them through paid media. I think oftentimes when digital marketings, at least in like the early 2020s or a few years back, would be like, okay, you have a ROAS goal of that and your budget is this. I'm just going to spend as much of it as I can on remarketing because I'll blow your ROAS out of the water. You're going to be so happy with me and blah, blah, blah. But the reality is that dries up really, really quickly. We've been forced to do that for brands a handful of times. And so we know firsthand that that's a recipe for the opposite of growth, a retraction for sure. So when we're looking at paid media, the funnel is a little bit more gray. Like, it used to be top of funnel, middle of funnel, where you're social engaged and you're really social engaged, and then bottom of funnel was anyone who's been to the website but hasn't converted. With Performance Max on Google and Advantage Plus Shopping on Meta, these pools of people are becoming so cloudy that it's more important to say, how do I tell my brands that a new customer ROAS or a new customer CAC is going to hit whatever benchmark, and then prove that happened. And so that's more what we're focused on now in our 360 approach, is like, we can spend 30% on remarketing if we want, but it should be remarketing to people who are product aware and have never converted. We shouldn't be remarketing to people who one can like get the sale through email on, right? So that's really what we're trying to prove, I think, now, is new customer performance rather than like total ROAS for a initiative in a campaign.
Now, how are you? I don't want to get too in the weeds, but I want to ask how you're distinguishing the product aware.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, how are you distinguishing the product aware so that you can kind of play in that gray space and then move them down or move them through the funnel?
Yeah, so we would really classify it like, and again, everything's getting so like muddy and gray, is anyone who's viewed video ads like top of funnel. So they've like engaged in a certain level of your assets. So, they probably know something about you now. They've been to your website but haven't taken the action, or they have visited you on social or follow you on social, and they have never purchased or haven't purchased in like the look back window available by platform. So that's how we would classify product aware and serve them, campaigns and budgets related to remarketing. In that pool, like within the Meta ecosystem, the ads ecosystem, we can now see who is a new customer and who is a like existing customer. So that data becomes very clear through Meta now, thanks to like all the attribution advancements that they're making for us. But oftentimes, like a Triple Whale or a North Beam or some MMM model is going to help us look at a more complete picture.
Now, there's a lot of, to me, moving people through this funnel is it's a bit of a long game. Because, before we hopped on, I said we're all inundated with so much content that it's really hard to pick out what is the content that really gets them to convert and what that looks like. I'm curious as to how you're leveraging paid media, paid marketing to really nurture a long-term relationship for these D2C fashion brands.
Yeah, and I mean, I hate to have the most generic example or answer again, but like it does depend, right? So we're going to look at the client's path length to purchase, so touch points, and then also lag times, the number of days. And that's going to help us, like, yeah, understand where they are so that we can at least sustain that. So if it takes 7 days and 3 touch points, cool. Like now we know our
Yeah.
frequency needs to be 3, and like we're probably gonna have to wait till like the meta pixel doesn't even fire, right? If they get to day 8, we've lost that tracking in meta.
Yeah.
So how do you stand out though and build that flow? Well, that data I just described is going to help us like back into it. So we're saying to the client, because we're becoming educated on their business, like whether or not you know it, it is 3 touch points and it is 7 days. And so therefore our strategy is going to stack up to hit that. Now, the more challenging and next step that's going to come out of that is, well, what hooks do you use throughout the funnel to actually get them to
Yeah.
move down to then want to purchase within those 7 days and 3 touch points? And so for that, they're still pretty standard. Like I think top of funnel is really edutainment. Like how do I tell someone that what's different about us while entertaining them long enough to get them to watch however many seconds of the video I need them to watch to be able to begin to remarket to them. And then as you move to like more aware audiences, then you can go into things like testimonials, press hooks, before and afters, or like how I use this in my daily life. So there's a lot of things like that. Get ready with me that can apply for lower in the funnel. But I think that first point of touch really needs to be video, and it has to be educational. And if the brand can't do that within their own 4 walls, that's when you employ the creators and affiliates to start helping out at a higher caliber. And that might dry up soon. Like people are already getting very sick of creators. So I think like take it while it's hot, you know?
Oh, that'll definitely foster a totally different conversation. I do have a question for you because we will touch on the creators because that's
Hmm.
because sometimes I do get, a little tired of them. But besides the point, I would love to know from fashion to other D2C brands, maybe a little bit more lifestyle, what are the unique challenges for fashion brands that you don't typically see with other lifestyle brands? And how do you, I guess this is a two-part question, how do you kind of like work through those challenges?
Yeah, well, definitely don't want to make enemies of the designers, but not every seasonal collection is created equal, and sometimes like there are just duds, and like it will first prove out that our ROAS is lower, and then it will prove out that their like total business is missing expectations from a revenue perspective, right? So then, the worst case scenario would be us being like, "Told you so," but it's sort of what the early science says is that the data is not super compelling from a return on ad spend perspective. At which point you go back to the design team and figure out like if there are ways to showcase the new fashion season or the season of the collection differently so that it does land. Or see if there are like evergreen SKUs and products they have that can kind of carry the weight of a season that's a little bit lighter on performance. So I would say that's the pro and the con is usually the fashion brands we work with are kind of planning things out and shooting it seasonally. And if those assets miss the mark, then we're kind of in a mad scramble to figure out what to do to service it. But then, there are the glorious seasons where you're like, oh my gosh, like we were struggling to get a 3 6 months ago, and now we're at a 12. Like the skies opened up for us. So it's a little bit of a mixed bag there. And I would say that's when it's going well, it's really easy because we don't have to do all
Yeah.
the back and forth like creative variations and recommendations. So that would probably be the biggest difference where like we work with beauty brands a lot too. And for them, it's like, how many different swatches can we have of this? And how many like assets of it dripping off the face and like all the different ways you can strike a beauty asset for one SKU. Like brands usually have like 12 different hooks and angles of talking about one SKU, where in fashion, it's more collective about that whole season of clothing rather than like this one particular sweater or dress.
That's so interesting and actually is a good segue back into influencers and creators because to your point, there are only so many angles you can take with like one particular product. looking at it from a seasonal standpoint, that's also interesting too. But I think that I feel like that's where influencers and creators had really launched, is in this fashion and beauty place. So what do you think is going to happen, or maybe not what do you think is going to happen? What are the changes that you're seeing with how often brands are leveraging creators and influencers now versus maybe a few years ago when it was really hot to try?
Yeah, I think beauty is leveraging creators more heavily just because they do need those like 12 different ways to talk about a single
Yeah.
SKU. And sometimes like it's just too heavy of a lift and a cost for the brand to do. And I think smart fashion brands are also leveraging, and let me answer beauty for a second. So I would say a good beauty campaign, like 50% of the assets are creator generated and
Yeah.
50% are brand. Maybe even more than 50% creator, but definitely not more brand. And then on the fashion side of things, I think the smart fashion brands are starting to include creators on a regular basis with their seasonal drops, because in the event their own assets don't meet the mark, they're going to need this for the livelihood of the season. And I think the brands who are doing it well are the brands that have like an eye on boutique and like brick and mortar place too, because they're then building this more beautiful in-house seasonal collection because they're trying to prove that it should sell other places. So I feel like
Yeah.
that's really the sweet spot of like having a creative design team that's going to take bringing this collection to life more seriously than those that are like purely DTC.
I love that. I also wonder, because you live in the D2C fashion space and you've said a lot about Meta. So it sounds like that's where you're seeing like a heavy investment from a paid media perspective between and I separate the Facebook Meta and then Instagram and then TikTok and maybe even YouTube. Like if all of them were up and running or side
Mm-hmm.
by side, which one do
Mm-hmm.
you think is the one that kind of goes ahead? Or I would imagine you're going to say it depends on like where your audience lives, but do you find one where you are getting kind of just a better return on investment for whatever reason?
Yeah, I think Meta's still going to have a better return on ad spend. And yeah, we were just doing an analysis for a client today of like feed versus reels versus stories, and then
Yeah.
also channel Meta or Instagram versus Facebook. And it's interesting sometimes because you're like, why would Meta spend that much in a placement that like did nothing for them? So there's always those question marks when you're doing machine learning. But I think to answer your question, I would throw the biggest bet on TikTok, even with the difficulties of like what will happen here in the US with that platform, because the reason I'd still go after TikTok is they are figuring out shops really quickly and
Yeah.
well, and it's like just scaling a lot faster than Instagram shops, in my opinion. And then their affiliate network is just giving media marketers, rather, not necessarily media buyers, way more intel on what each creator can bring to the table. And it's not a black box like it is when you're working with creators in different marketplaces and different channels. So that's why I would lean more heavily on TikTok. Fashion struggles with shop though because of the different sizes and the colorways. And so it has been more challenging to have fashion on TikTok shop or Meta shop for those reasons than like a skincare brand or like probably like a handbag brand is going to have a little bit more of an easy time converting there. The other thing to think about is how considered your purchase is. If they need to spend 7 days contemplating whether or not to buy you and multiple touch points, like is being on TikTok shop really going to add a ton of value for you? So I'd probably still recommend people launch. If their TikTok shop isn't ready, I would still recommend starting to spark organic content as ads pointing to ecom and see what that results. You compare to Meta and from there decide whether or not shops make sense.
Oh, I love that insight and that tip. And I do like that you said TikTok because I think there are a lot of people that are shying away from it and really sticking to like Instagram. But, as a consumer and as a shopper, I would say also a sticky point is that it's a lot easier to buy something on TikTok Shop than it is to be on Instagram shop. And I don't know if it's like what it looks like in general and like how you're navigated. If it takes me someplace else, I'm out of it. I will easily abandon a cart that I feel like I've fallen in love with. I also think from a TikTok perspective, especially in fashion, what I really tend to see, and I think this is a benefit of leveraging creators and influencers, is for fashion, not everyone's the same size. So when you see someone that matches your size with something that you've seen
Mm-hmm.
over and over and over again, like I feel like my feed is all Halara corduroy skirts right now, right? Like, and I've seen them in all shapes and sizes, but I think that there's a ton of benefit. There's something about it that works really well. So I love the fact that you said TikTok.
Yeah, good. Thank you. It's a fun platform. I'm excited to see how it progresses.
Absolutely. Now, looking at just kind of this landscape of like maybe the next 12 to 24 months, 1 to 2 years, what do you see as far as emerging trends that are really going to affect those fashion and beauty brands that we need to be looking out for?
Yeah, I mean, this one hopefully doesn't feel too obvious, but I think there's going to be this like resurgence of community and like brand
Mhm.
loyalists that are sort of becoming voices of the brand. And so I think, gone are the days of like you just repackaging the thing the brand next to you is doing it and like
Yeah.
putting their own spin on it. I just don't think consumers have space for that anymore. And they really want to be a part of something that they're excited about. And that's probably not going to be like, shoes from H&M, right? Like it's going to be something that's a little bit more curated and specific and special in their eyes. So I would say like working to build that community, and no offense H&M listeners, hopefully they'll build the community for you soon too. And we're all guilty of buying from brands like that from time to time. So I'm right there with you. So I'd say community will be big. And then just the emergence of like freshness and creative design. I mean, I follow a couple design experts and they're really getting into the dopamine, like just the oversaturated, like so much stuff going on in an asset. And so I think like the days of super clean, simple looking assets and lifestyles are kind of behind us for a
Interesting.
time being. So I'm excited to see just like that rush of like, feelings about what I'm looking at rather than just like, oh, look at that pretty bag on a pedestal.
Well, yeah, and that's a really great trend to like be on the lookout for because you're right, everything is very clean and aesthetic. Like I feel like there's white and gold everywhere, which I am a clumsy person, so for me it always is like I would get that dirty in a heartbeat. So I would never want to be in this kind of,
Yeah.
I guess I see it more in lifestyle, but like it's also very true in like fashion, how everything is a lot cleaner and talk about really trying to be disruptive visually, like you're saying, really hitting the dopamine, like, oh, that's going to wake me up and that's going to make me notice. So I will
Yeah.
definitely be on the lookout for that. Now, we've talked a little bit, well, not a little bit, we talked a lot about just kind of paid marketing, and you did touch a little bit in regards to like budgeting. But I know that there are a lot of brands who are starting off. And of course, everyone wants to be able to do paid media or paid marketing. But they always run into like, okay, but I don't really have the budget for it. And if I did allocate a budget, I don't even know where to start or how much I should and how long. This one's a big one. How long should I wait on what I've invested to see if it's even worth it? So, kind of what's your advice on like on budgeting for maybe a brand that's just starting out that is a little bit smaller?
Yeah. We'll start with your own data, which probably isn't going to surprise you that I said that, but I think like the size of the budget should be at least, and this is, I hope I don't offend anyone, but like at least 30% of like profits, and
Yeah.
ideally 30% of top line. Like if we're back in the earlier days of like getting VC money very easily, it was 30% of top line, not 30% of profitability. So somewhere in there is going to be your magic spot of how much to spend per month. And that can be backwards looking if that's easier and you don't want to project out like how much bigger your business is going to be in the future. That's where I would start. Every single campaign, if you're spending money nationally, should have at least $25, if not $50 per day. So that will be another threshold of like, how complex should my build out be?
Yeah.
And then when will you see results? That's when it really goes back to what is your path length and what is your lag time. And within that window, you should be able to start seeing results. So if that window is 7 days, just following that example we used earlier, for sure by 14 days, they're going to have a point of view on whether or not it's working. And hopefully whomever's helping with ads can tell them how they're going to like tweak and refine to make the results better should they not be happy.
And that was such great insight and tips. I love it when my guests can package it up, because I think that's all incredibly digestible. Not only digestible, but incredibly doable, especially when you want to get started into that. This has been amazing. I've got one final question for you before we do sign off. And that question is, if you knew then what you know now, what is your marketing advice that you give to yourself, or non-marketing advice? You know, I will let you decide which way you want to go, marketing or non-marketing advice.
Yeah, I mean, I am a millennial, so young people might not respond to this as well, but I think the in-person like networking opportunities and just like getting out there and physically meeting with people is really important. I've recently joined a lot of female founder groups and hanging out with them a lot more, and just the amount of work one has to do owning a small business to like get referrals to convert is very different than getting cold audiences to convert. So for me, it's been like golden to spend more time with female founders in real life and form relationships with them.
That's such great advice. And, I think that sometimes people are just afraid to put themselves out there. But what I always say is everybody is feeling the same thing.
Yeah, exactly.
It's awkward for everybody. So let's just be awkward together. But what
100%.
wasn't awkward was this conversation. So I can't thank you enough for coming on here and just kind of sharing your insights from a paid media perspective with a fashion lens. I love that we, dipped our toes into like the creator influencer conversation as well too. So thank you so much.
Yeah, thank you so much for having me, Katya.
Welcome back. I hope that you found this episode with Nikki just as interesting as I did. I am ready to dive into my key takeaways. I've got my notes here, so let's make sure we stay on track. My first key takeaway from Nikki's episode is customer feedback can fuel marketing. Now, Nikki really drove home the importance of just diving deep into customer insights to supercharge your marketing efforts. It is as simple as a customer survey. So, the insights from asking your existing customers strategic questions is incredibly empowering to a brand. The insights that you gain can be true game changers in developing marketing strategies. It's also about kind of keeping those communication lines opened. It's the voice of customer that is needed from a product marketing perspective. It's the foundation of really understanding your product market fit. And the thing is, it's continuous. You're always having to ask them because you want to make sure that you're improving. This is how I personally use customer feedback as a marketer. So, for example, if you're giving them a survey, I use words that they use in the survey because there should always be at least one open ended question. But I use the words that they use in ads, emails, and messaging. I also use it to focus on priorities, right? Prioritize the priorities. I will never forget creating an FAQ document for a podcast I used to host for a previous brand that I worked for. We're not going to name names, but you all know. I thought that it would be great from an SEO perspective to take all the questions that were asked during the podcast. And also, wouldn't it be great if someone didn't want to listen? They just wanted to get to like quote unquote the guts of the conversation. Long story short, no, it's not something people wanted, needed, or really even read, right? That was my perspective on it. It does, I shouldn't say it does no good to just get my perspective as an individual marketer. You really have to get into the heads of your consumers, right? Of your community. What do they want? What do they need? That's how you can be strategic. And without that feedback, we would have continued to burn calories, creating something that had no value to our customer and our community. Now, that's a really small example, but there are so many of these types of examples. Stop and think about it for a moment. And you can probably create a list of things that maybe you're thinking are a good idea, but no one on the other side has told you, you know what would be great? The second key takeaway: community for the win for brand growth. I'm a content and community person, so I love it when my key takeaways align with where my heart and soul is. I'm obsessed with community coming up in this recording. Now, building a vibrant brand community is essential for more than just brand loyalty. It's about kind of creating this living, breathing ecosystem around your brand. Now, Nikki shared insights on how brands can nurture this community by actively involving customers in the brand's narrative and really making them feel valued and heard. Oh, don't we all just want to be heard? Building a community is not about sales, which I know feels counterintuitive because that's what executive leadership looks at, right? How many leads did you bring in? What's the pipeline look like? But it is community, is that being said. Community is what makes a brand sticky. So I've made some notes for a quick summary for you on how you can nurture this community that you're building. And these were obviously from the podcast. I think I may have sprinkled a couple of my own. But the first is communicate regularly. Now, this means making it meaningful and relevant. Don't just send them an email to send them an email. This will help keep your brand top of mind. So you want it to be relative. Not relative, relevant is what I want to say. So if it is a monthly newsletter, and it doesn't even have to be monthly, it can be a quarterly newsletter. They should expect it, right? So that's one way that you can kind of foster a sense of community. The second is exclusive offers and content. Now, this is great because it works for D2C and B2B. So for example, it can be get a 5% discount, which doesn't sound like much, but get a 5 to 10% discount on XYZ if you're particularly a D2C brand. But a B2B brand could be, get this checklist. It's really going to help you do XYZ. It's all about creating value for your community. They should always be getting something from you. Another way is customer feedback loop. Get them involved. Ask them what they think. This is the surveys. This is even the post-purchase survey, right after, within 24 hours. Would you recommend? It's a great time to send the NPS, right? Or tell us about your experience. Give them something, right? So that you get some feedback and can do something with that. You can also use that information to kind of curate a good experience for them in general. Maybe they say something that sparks, I don't know, like this domino effect of, based on this feedback, they would like a check-in from customer service, every 3 months. I don't know, something like that, right? But you don't know what you don't know. And you have to create a feedback loop to get it and to know. Another way is community events. Now, this can be in person or virtual. Don't overthink it, okay? Think simple meetups to discuss what's kind of keeping them up at night. That's a personal favorite question that I ask in every community that I've built. And it consistently works because people are always thinking about things. And it is really them centric, where what's keeping you up at night? Because chances are that you're not the only one that's thinking about it. If you gather people in a meetup, for example, it gives them the opportunity to learn from one another, and you as a brand are fostering that connection. The final one that I'm going to leave you with in regards to community is recognition and rewards. You've got people that are engaged in this community eventually, right? Highlight them. Maybe a dedicated blog to get to know them, or it can be as simple as gamification, because who doesn't like to win more points and get bigger prizes, right? But you can include gamification as part of this initiative in building and rewarding your community. Now, as if that key takeaway wasn't enough, I am on my final key takeaway, and my final key takeaway is budgeting. So happy that Nikki dropped some really smart budgeting knowledge bombs in there. I always feel like Any insight on budget allocation can be a game changer in marketing. So don't just set a budget, actively manage it based on real time data to optimize your campaign performance. The baseline of spending at least 30% of your revenue for marketing efforts is a quick guide that Nikki shared with us during the conversation. And she also shared when you're running ads, having a daily budget of $25 to $50 for each of your campaigns. Now, if you're listening, you may have a severe reaction to these numbers, either way, either too much or too little. But the truth of the matter is, with marketing, it depends, and this is air quotes, but it's true. It depends is always a part of it because you could be managing a marketing budget of millions versus, wait, you have a marketing budget? Now, I've worked for both. These are good general guidelines, especially if you've never really managed a budget, right? Like if you've never been given like this number to go out there and quote unquote do marketing. So what this does is it gets you started and then you measure the performance. What does the data tell you? Are you getting leads and making sales? Are they good leads and are they the right customers? And then more importantly, test and optimize, my friends. Nothing is ever set it and forget it in marketing. So create a flywheel for setting, reviewing, and optimizing. What did you take away from today's episode? I want to hear it. Let's keep this conversation going. A very special thank you to my podcast editor, Johnny Ike. And thanks to you for spending your time with me today. Until next time, may the conversation flow, the laughter linger, and the outlook remain optimistic, but grounded in reality. This is Katya, signing off.